Welcome to Adventures in Gonzo Vision. I'm here with Luli, also known as, well, your name is Luzane, right?
Yes.
Or Luzanne?
Yes, Luzanne. It's changed. The surname's changed. So I got
Because you're married
married.
now. Yes, you're
Got
Van der
hitched,
Berg.
yes.
So I
Yeah.
call you Luli. I've always known you as Luli, you know.
Everyone still calls me Luli,
And
except, corporates.
right. And you're in South Africa at the moment on the Eastern Cape.
Western Cape, actually. Close to the Eastern Cape, on the
Sorry.
eastern side of the Western Cape.
Of course. All right. So you're on the Western Cape. I
Yes.
just got confused with my own geography there. But I met you over in South Korea, and it was like you say, 10 years ago. We were just talking about it, and there was quite a few. There was also Chanel that we met from South Africa, and there was a few others from South Africa. But I was always very intrigued to ask so many questions about what it's like to live in South Africa. Um, just on a quick note. So, first of all, welcome to the office. This is
Oh,
the Office
nice.
of Tree Spirits. We've got blue skies today. The sun is out, and it's the first time we've seen the sun in months. So it's a beautiful day. Obviously, I'm in my bedroom, and this is not the case. But um, the office itself is a place where I'll be featuring the videos a lot. So it's coming in the future. So you'll see how it all sort of comes into play at some point. But I've got to meet you out in South Korea, and for you coming from South Africa to South Korea at the time, you worked in South Korea as a teacher for how long?
1 year. Just a
And
year.
what was the transition like after living in South Africa, knowing what South Africa is like, and then, experiencing South Korea? What was that like for you?
Sure. Oh, where do I start? So initially, I wasn't well versed on South Korea as such. So it was kind of like a close your eyes and pin the pencil on the map scenario in that sense. The reason I chose South Korea is it was one of the best paying countries for that mission. Um, and also, I didn't need the TEFL qualification. You only needed, a university degree, which was fine. So I didn't have to do any extra courses. So I decided on going there. In my mind, it was going to be similar to the Thailand feel, like, all the crystals and the hippies and the, um, you know, various religions. And got there, and it was quite a shock because it was very commercialized, very capitalist, very appearance orientated, not at all what I expected. But that was fine. Um, so what was very apparent to me, I think that the one thing that deeply struck me was the early childhood development there, the standard of early childhood development versus what I knew from South Africa, because at that stage I'd left a job uh, as a preschool teacher in South Africa, went to South Korea. Um, it was just night and day. Um, I
Really?
know there's issues within South Korea in terms of how hard they push the students, and they have quite a bit on their plate, and I'm not necessarily for that, but it just opened my eyes to how much work we need to do in South Africa. And I'll
Right.
tell you why, and we'll get into that probably. And I think most people are well versed in, South Africa's history and the struggles, but real time now, there's still a lot to do. The
Right.
division is still very apparent. Where I stay, the town, beautiful town, um, Swellendam, and then you have Railton, which is mostly the colored people, and then you have Machoks, which is mostly black people, and that's the way most towns and cities are still in South Africa. You have a kind of things are changing slowly but surely, but I feel not fast enough. Um, the frustration is tangible, so it's understandable. And then we do a lot of work in the communities, and when you get to do work in the communities, you realize um, that the children are being left behind, and if we don't fix that, we're not fixing South Africa. It's not happening.
Right.
So
That's very
kind of,
interesting.
yeah, it kind of put me on a bit of a, what do they call it, as like a side adventure where I want to focus on bridging that gap in terms of the early childhood development, because I feel like if you reach the children and they can see what opportunities lie ahead of them, then they would be more capable of having a successful career, building a successful life for themselves and their families once they reach adulthood.
Interesting.
And won't perpetuate this cycle of poverty. But yeah, there's lots of work to be done. So that was the one thing I saw in South Korea. And honestly, I could see the difference between myself and the other teachers. My application of logic wasn't up to their standard. I felt quite stupid when I got there, to be honest. I really did. I felt dumb. But luckily, I picked up very quickly where my shortcomings were. So that was nice because I could work on that. It made me more efficient in my train of thought. So I think that was the biggest thing I took away from that.
Right. Fascinating, really. I mean, the actual intrigue that I had, talking to you from the very start was the fact that I was actually raised in South Africa from 73 to 84. So I was only from the experience of what it's like to live within the apartheid era at the time, and I wasn't even aware of it. And then obviously the changes came, and a lot has happened. So when I got to meet you, I was just intrigued of what it was like to actually be in South Africa. If I was to be over there now, what would it be like? And it sounded to me like, talking not just to you, but many of the South Africans, that it was just every day was an adventure. Every day was an adventure of survival, and not what was being portrayed in the media. And very few people knew what it was like to actually live in South Africa, no matter what background you had, And so I learned a lot from what you were telling me. But what was it like? Because I know what it was like in South Korea, and I had 10 years out there, and it was a blessing in a way, in terms of the security. Just being able to walk down the street, without worrying about any kind of crime, and being able to leave my motorcycle with the helmet on it and the engine running. Even in the UK where I'm at the moment, that is something I wouldn't do. But in South Korea, it was just so safe, Then coming from South Korea back to South Africa, what was the adventure like for you then, to then make the adjustment and back into a society that didn't have those kind of safeties? What was it like for you then?
Yeah, definitely. I think it felt like my anxiety had a bit of a holiday, like a year off. That was nice.
Wow. Okay.
But it's difficult to explain. I'm probably like not very vocal about it, but a patriot at heart. So, but coming back, it was, how do I say, it's almost more apparent than before I left, like the state of the country. And when you talk about safety and crime and that type of thing. Interestingly, I was so surprised while I was in South Korea, I left my wallet in a taxi once. And the taxi company somehow found me. I don't know how, but they returned my wallet with all my money in. That's not something you'll see here. That's like, you
won't see
you're
it
not
here
sure what.
either.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I
I
think
mean,
that's just unique to South Korea and
it
maybe
is
Japan as well,
yeah, it's very interesting. But look, I think for me, on the safety side, yes, it is a big concern in South Africa, but I haven't had really bad experiences, so I'm probably one of the lucky ones. I think it does get exaggerated a lot in the media. Make no mistake, we do have quite high crime rates, rape, big problem, gender-based violence, huge problem. However, with my privilege from apartheid era, I'm pretty much unscathed. I can't speak for the rest of the people, but I guarantee you, when you look at the informal settlements, those women, children, they are much less protected within their communities than I would be. And I think that because of the structures in apartheid versus post-apartheid, you can imagine the minority ruling over the majority. So you have a certain amount of resources being spent, obviously, on the minority. Now you change it up. Apartheid ends. We have a democratic country, but you still have only those resources. For instance, police service, medical, hospitals, schools. All of that was on the periphery for Black communities, colored communities, Indian communities. And the focus was on the white communities. But we were the minority. So now, all of a sudden, the government had to expand its service delivery immediately. I can
Wow.
I can send you some figures, but I mean it's insane. And so it's not where it should be yet. These communities aren't being served the way they should be because the resources just aren't there. Um,
Right.
the,
So the
the
infrastructure as well, would you say that was also a big factor?
exactly, because you must remember the apartheid government moved all the Black people, all the colored people, all the Indians to the periphery. Um,
Right.
and the focus was on your central towns. That's where all the service delivery was focused to. Um, Look, there was some service delivery, but let's face it, it was a joke, an absolute joke.
Right.
In contrast, for instance, Zimbabwe went through the same thing, but what the colonialist Zimbabwean government did differently was they put focus on education to those being marginalized, which helped a little in the sense that we have a lot of Zimbabweans coming to South Africa and they're well educated, which means they are better versed at facing the challenges of life. Um, so I think
Interesting that. I didn't
in
know
that
that.
sense, yeah, that was I think a great disadvantage to the South African communities.
Right.
So there's a lot of fixing still to be done. The taxpayer pool, for instance, is still very small. Most of the population aren't even in the bracket where they are able to pay tax or need to pay tax. Yet that's where your biggest kind of need is in terms of capital injection, service delivery. So then you have the taxpayers getting angry because now the taxes are being deviated from the areas where they live in, which means the service delivery declines in the kind of the towns, the established towns, whatever. So there's a lot of friction happening, and I think municipalities struggle to juggle these kind of finer nuances and getting stuff, sharing the pie equally, and it can't really be shared equally. And most of the pie needs to really go to these communities, but it's then you have decline of what's already been developed, and it's a very difficult balance, I think.
Wow. I love your answer to that because you explained it so well. I've actually, as you're explaining, it sounds hectic, as you would say. It just sounds like, thank God I'm not having to deal with any of that at the moment, in terms of organizing that, because I couldn't imagine what it'd be like. And it helps to explain why there are so many problems still yet to sort of be resolved at some point.
Yes.
But it's good to sort of explain that there's fundamental issues at the very core that need to be addressed, and I don't at the moment it doesn't seem like there is a solution yet because there's so much to sort of deal with.
Yeah, I think the problem with humans, I mean, I suffer from it, is impatience. I'm not a very patient person, um, and I live a good life. I I have the luxury of being able to be patient. There are people living in shacks, people living in the worst conditions imaginable, um, and they're being promised RDP housing and service delivery with every political party, whichever political party you vote for, they're being promised this, and that. Um, and in their mind, it's going to happen. It's going to happen in my lifetime. And that's not necessarily the case for the general public voting these people in power. They think it is, but it's not. They're being misled. Um, and so recently we've been quite involved in the politics in our local town, just because I'm building a future for my children here. This is where I want to retire. So we need to address these issues. We need to address the poverty. We need to address the kind of separation between communities and try and build that bridge and close that gap. Otherwise, nothing's going to work. There is no future for the town.
Yeah.
And so it's given me a lot of insight to
Right.
how the politics operate versus the actual municipality, which is supposed to be separate from politics, but it's not. Politics is quite a dirty game, so it kind of muddies the water there a bit. And then dealing with people becoming impatient and knowing what the capacity is of the municipality and really the good work they're putting in, but it's just not enough. And
Right.
so you have to, it's like a bomb waiting to explode. And you have to manage it. You have to manage it. So that's why we're involved in a lot of community work, is to try and get the privileged, the well-off, the companies that are doing well to invest in these communities so that we can close the gap and assist government. Because as much as we can ostracize them and say, oh, well, you're spending our money, you're wasting our money, you're looting, stealing, corruption, whatever, that's not going to fix the problem. Complaining is not going to fix anything. So I think closing the gap should be the main focus of the general public who are able to assist.
Wow, that's a good answer. That's what you want to hear. You want to hear that there's an idea, like a solution, at least sort of intended, to and bringing the gap between the people is makes sense on every level, And the adventure that you then went. You mentioned you've got a family. How many children do you have?
3.
So you got married and you got 3 children. Wow.
Yes. So, we actually only got married about a year ago. So we had kids, did the whole life thing together, and then I said, okay, well, we should probably make it official at some point. I mean, we're not affiliated religiously, so it wasn't really a necessity as such. But we made it official, so it's good.
Well, congratulations for that. That's really good to hear. It's good to still be in contact. And one day when I come out there, I definitely will be visiting. Just out of interest, what's the name of what area is it again? It's on the western.
So
area.
I live in the Western Cape, more to the east side, so east of Cape Town.
Right. So it's not as far up. I was thinking of Namibia. You up as far as that, but that's too far.
No, we are in the south. So I'm actually about, as the crow flies, an hour away from the most southern tip of Africa.
Right. Okay. Not too far then.
Yeah.
And you mentioned you were doing some work with the Khoi, which, as far as I know, they're sort of like a Bushman tribe. Is that right?
Yes. So I'm still learning. I haven't delved very deep into it. I have a big passion for it. I have a passion for anthropology, and ancient history, ancient architecture, like all the missing pieces of the puzzle. That fascinates me, and the speculation around it and hearing people's opinions. So with the Khoisan, that's the kind of term used the official term used in South Africa, but there's a lot of debate on what the correct term would be. It used to be Bushman, which is now seen as like a frowned upon term. The Khoi and the San people don't like that. So you have the Khoi and then you have the San people. From what I know, and I speak from quite a bit of naivety because I'm still delving into it, is the Khoi are the hunter-gatherer, are more like herders, like pastoral herders where they would settle in an area and then move along with their cattle, but at a much slower pace. The Khois, the San, are hunter-gatherers, so they were nomadic folk. The Khoi were nomadic as well, but not as much as the San. So the Khoi came down from the north, and the San apparently were all along the coastline of South Africa.
Right.
So 2 different people, but very similar in their genetics. but
I
different
got you.
groups. So I met a guy here. His name is Donovan Julius. He's they call themselves Ku people, and they I can't pronounce it correctly because it has clicks, but like they live in Sierbraak. He lives in Sierbraak, and they call themselves the Sierbraak. The name was given obviously by the colonialists, but their name for that town is Cairo, which is it has clicks, so I'm not pronouncing it correctly, but
Right.
that's the cultural name that they have for their town. So him and I have been chatting, and we have a bit of a plan to set up a design hub in town where we want to capture the heritage of the area.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, so within kind of a design concept where for now him and I would be the main designers, and then we would have what I call the makers of the different art principles, and they would execute our designs. And so that
Wow.
would be a bit of a skills transfer, job creation kind of thing. The aim is to do it like take it go to her, like, high end design stuff that we will then obviously sell online, get some international exhibitions going, and hopefully take it international. Um,
Right.
and
Fascinating.
yeah, hopefully get on some other designers. I'm currently speaking to the heritage groups here, the museum, everyone who has a hand in knowing the history of this specific area, which is the Overberg, so that I'm hoping that as I kick up the dust, I'll find more designers with different stories to tell and different kind of nuances to the heritage here.
Brilliant.
So yeah,
So it's like a journey of your own because you'll be like discovering,
exactly,
through the adventure of this itself, you'll be discovering more about the ancient ways of
exactly.
the people. Because I'm fascinated with
Mm.
with the
I'm going
people.
to send you a link to a YouTube video which I just started watching. It's named How the Khoisan Became Coloureds. So
Okay.
the word colored, I know in many countries it's very offensive. In South Africa, it's what we call the concept is like either mixed race people or just the lighter brown people. Okay, so that's kind of the story of how the Khoi San were grouped into the colored group, which is
Right.
a vast, also again like a vast. It covers a lot of cultures and it's a lot of nuances within the history of South Africa, and I can speak for hours on how that happened. But yeah, by all means, go do some research on that. Very
Definitely.
fascinating.
That link that you sent to me, I'll put it into the video description of this
Okay.
podcast. Others can look at that as well. And anything that anything that you could back, like any references you've got at all on any of this, especially the work that you're doing ahead, I'll put into the links because I think it's fascinating to be able to follow something like this and really
Yes.
um, get more knowledgeable on the country for myself. That's really what I'm wanting
Yeah,
to know
I
more
mean,
about. You know.
I'm still learning stuff every day, and it's just never ending. So it's very fascinating. I think
Yeah.
because we're such a boiling pot of just stories and historic events and cultures, um, and that's why I wanted to start the design hub, because it's a bit of a selfish thing. Well, it's a lot of a selfish thing. As an Afrikaner in South Africa with the history that we have, there's a lot of guilt, which I carry. I mean, I was very young when apartheid ended. I think I was 5 when it ended, but it's been carried out throughout my, growing up. It's you kind of bombarded, you're faced with it from all directions. So there's a lot of guilt, and I want to create a space where everyone can just be comfortable with their heritage, because we have a heritage day, and so when I was in school it would be like, come dressed as, for heritage day, dress up according to your culture, and I never felt very comfortable doing that because um yeah, that's a bit, you know touchy. So I think a
Right.
lot of Afrikaners are getting lost, or we're losing a lot of our culture, because a lot of our culture is borrowed culture. And so we are told that it's not your own. You got it from there. You got it from there. And I want to create a space where everyone can just be like, okay, well, yes, so what? That's still part of who I am, and kind of face the uncomfortable truths comfortably, if that makes
Well, I
sense.
think, also you've got an artistic background as well. That's so I wouldn't say it's so much selfish because you're going to be sharing all of this.
Mm,
The idea is for everyone to share. So I'd say
mm,
it's a very valuable thing to have this kind of design hub, but also to get to know so much about the heritage. There's so many different heritage factors in South Africa. That
exactly.
um, just you could, like you say, you could be going on forever learning about the history of so many different sort of different types of people that are in South Africa.
Yes.
Um,
And I think,
and
the one thing I want to also bring out within the Design Hub is a lot of our history, you'll see in that video as well, the history was written by the colonizer, right? The only written history that we have on the Khoisan people, aside from the rock paint, the rock art, is written by people from the VOC, which were the Dutch East India Company that came here. So now we have to contextualize, for instance, through verbal history, storytelling, the rock art, archaeology, and then that written script. What's the true history? And I think a lot is lost, and I think we'll never find it, and that's okay. But we need to acknowledge that, because people get very opinionated on their history, and
right,
history is history.
yeah, it's
Never
his
really gonna
story.
know what was.
Where's
So
her story? That's what I say.
yeah,
Where's her story?
exactly. So I think I want to highlight that as well through the Design Hub and just be like, you know what? Um, there will be various different versions, but I think we need to focus on the positive moving forward. That's
That's brilliant. Yeah. There's also another project you're working on. You mentioned sort of helping a hospital getting funds, trying to develop a hospital in the
oh,
area.
it's actually our hospital. Yes, it's my husband and I. So he's a interesting character. You'll still meet him. Very big go-getter. Um, very colorful history.
Very
Very,
ambitious.
very ambitious. Extremely ambitious. Sometimes a bit too much for my
I
liking
can
because
relate. No, I can
I
relate.
end up being very busy. But um, he's also very intelligent and a bit of a brat, if I could put it that way. He's like honestly a bit of a brat. He knows that. I tell him that. But so he went through a bit of a health challenge um, early 2023, which was quite scary. In and out of hospital. Sometimes we didn't know if he was going to make it. So it was quite a bit of a challenge. And our company faced a couple of issues during that time. And we decided that we wanted to uproot our family to a smaller town where we could just slow down a bit from the city life, focus on his health, focus on recovering the business, and just breathe a little. So we came to Swellendam, and he had another health issue, and the closest hospital was about an hour away. And I mean, this man was crying in pain. I had the kids in the back of the car, and I was just bolting for this hospital because I didn't know what was wrong. I didn't know what was happening. We do have a hospital in town. It's a state hospital, state owned. So, and it doesn't have a lot of facilities. It's a really well run hospital, very nice. But you can't do major surgeries there, for instance. So you would have had to go to another hospital anyway. So my decision was to just drive straight through and not delay anything. And
Right.
that's where we decided, okay, we need a private hospital because the way it works in South Africa is you have state-owned hospitals, you have private-owned hospitals. If you are of a higher income bracket, you have medical aid and you get to go to the best hospitals. If you don't, you go to state hospitals. We are lucky in the Western Cape. The Department of Health in the Western Cape, very well run, very kind of efficient. So the facilities are okay. It wouldn't be my preference for myself, my husband, my children, but it's better than in other provinces in the country. So what we said was, okay, let's set up a hospital here with triple P licensing, which is public something partnership, so public-private partnership, PPP. So what that does is, say someone in the state hospital needs a certain type of treatment, our hospital does that treatment. The state then sends the patient to the private hospital, and we bill the state. So by doing that, the whole community benefits from the development, not just the people that can afford medical aid.
Right.
Which I thought was nice, because at this stage, when there's an emergency, they can handle the emergency and stabilize someone here, but then they have to travel an hour via ambulance.
Right.
And that counts for anyone, whether
So
they have it or not.
in terms of what you mentioned at the very beginning, with the kind of the challenges that you have, say, infrastructure and just resources and things, are you finding that trying to develop this hospital, there's a lot of problems along those lines that are getting in the way at all?
So the one problem we faced was the opposition party. So we have a ruling party in our town called the Democratic Alliance. I can go down that road as well. A lot of subtle nuances in terms of the perception of the general larger public on this specific political party, and then the opposition party being the ANC. So we have actually had attacks on us via social media, saying that this development is just going to help the few that can afford it, and we had to set the record straight, because these allegations can spread quite quickly on social media, and that can cause quite a bit of stir. So we've had to set the record straight, and within our community meetings, we openly discuss how this is going to benefit the community. We really did this to better the service delivery for the whole community. But you do have little jabs being thrown, the whole thing being politicized, even though we're not really politically affiliated at all. So we've had that. Then the other thing is just bureaucratic red tape, to be honest. For instance, we could have built because it's a private-public partnership, we could have built the hospital on state land. There is space, for instance, at the state hospital, there is some land space for us to develop it there. But that then becomes like a 3-year process, just obtaining the right to build on that land.
Right.
So buying privately owned land makes it much quicker. So it's just, I think South Africa has a lot of rules and regulations in place because of the influx of corruption and giving everyone a fair chance to do service delivery for the state. But it makes for a lot of red tape.
Right.
It's such a lengthy process, just working with and through government at this stage.
Wow.
So yeah, that's about it.
And onto that would move on to the next part of it, where living out in South Africa and the recent sort of points that President Trump brought up. I don't want to get into too much of the political aspects of it, but I remember getting in touch with you, saying, what is that? What's going on there? Can you give me some heads up on, first of all, is he speaking about something that is a real thing happening in South Africa? Because I know that land, is it disappropriation is like a new law is coming, but I haven't, I don't live in South Africa, so I was asking you, what is it like? And I think you gave me a very balanced answer to that, and as to what's actually going on. If you could just elaborate on that at the moment, just from a perspective of what it's like living there, and a sort of a real answer to what's going on there, if you could.
Okay, so the land issue has been an issue since the word go. We must remember that during the apartheid era, when it was made official, people were moved. They were moved into certain districts. If it was like on a color scale kind of thing. If you were a certain shade of something, you moved to here. I might be exaggerating, but it was definitely whites here. Everyone else that side, please. So
Right.
there is a lot of, and again, here we get to the history, documentation, everything being written by the colonizer, the minority that ruled under apartheid. And so the general feeling is that a lot of land that's currently being farmed, owned by white farmers, was acquired through, how can I say, criminal means, in that sense, that the people who were moved off the land weren't necessarily compensated for the land, didn't necessarily know what they were getting themselves into initially. So there's a lot of kind of misunderstanding in terms of where everyone stands at this stage.
Right.
So I think what the president was trying to do with the Land Appropriation Act is.
So this is the South African president, you mean?
Yes, so yeah,
Right.
President Ramaphosa. Look, this thing has been coming a long way, but obviously it's very sensitive, so it has to be handled very delicately. So I think what the government is trying to do is say, okay, if we have people speculating with land, meaning we have acres of land, we're not doing anything with it. It's not being farmed, it's not being utilized for development, it's just there as a asset growing in value. That should be taken, we buy it from you for a fair price, and then we give this land to previously disadvantaged people for the agricultural development or whatever. I think that's the intention. Or if there is state-owned land that's not being utilized, let's use that land.
Right.
I think that's the main intention. However, you have on the one side of the spectrum white farmers that are there are a lot of farm attacks, there are a lot of farm murders, and it's brutal, Liam. It's really, really brutal. Women being raped in front of their children, children having boiling water being poured over their faces. It's really like it gets rough. So you have the minority group of farmers facing these kind of challenges and crimes being committed against them. And it's not isolated to the farmers only. The farm workers, everyone on the farm, are privy to being victim to these crimes when it
Wow.
happens. And you could argue, if they wanted to steal stuff or whatever, then why the brutality? Because oftentimes it's the elderly as well. I mean, really, really old people that have absolutely no way of defending themselves against, 3, 4, 5 large men.
Right.
So the brutality doesn't make sense. So on the one end, you have the farmers up in arms about the brutality and what's happening. And it's fishy that so much of this is going on. Then you have on the other side, people saying it's general crime. We have crime all over South Africa. Yes, there are house break-ins that are just as brutal, rapes in other scenarios that are just as brutal. So you can argue that point, that it's just it's a South African condition at this stage. And then you get on the other side of the spectrum, very angry black people saying we want our land back.
Right.
And somewhere in between lies the truth, lies a solution, and I think that's what government is trying to do here. But
Right.
now you have the previously disadvantaged people who believe that all the land was stolen, all the land owned by white people was stolen, because obviously you always get the extremes on each side, and then the rest of us are kind of operating in the middle. So on the extreme side, you have a lot of people believing that all the land was stolen, and they deserve it. What they don't understand is government doesn't mean you're going to just take any farmer's land, because we need the farmers. They're producing our food. Without that, we won't have food security. You can't just go but you have people kind of this build up, this anger build up. And I think that's what the farmers on the other end of the spectrum is fearful of. That at one point this bomb is just going to explode and you're going to have like mass land invasions of farms, similar to what happened in Zimbabwe.
Right. Right,
So
because I was in Zimbabwe at the time in '97, just for about 3 months at the time, and I remember the newspaper articles basically saying that the farms are just not going to be there in the next year. They're going to belong to the group of people. I forget the party that it was. It's just the farmers were going to lose their land. And I remember knowing a farmer at the time, and like his family had been there for generations and generations,
yeah,
and the concerns they all went through, and then obviously there's a huge history to that where majority of I think Zimbabwe actually dropped its financial its stock market just crashed, I think,
yeah.
after
No,
that
I
decision,
mean, at one stage, I think it was like a Zimbabwean dollar was, it was like a million and something Zimbabwe dollars for 1 rand. The exchange rate was insane.
Yeah,
I also know Zimbabweans who lost their farms. I mean, they told me the stories. It was hectic. It was really, really scary.
yeah,
Lost their lives. So you can understand the panic. Um, and the thing
yeah,
is, I think with this bill, it does give the opportunity for government to do some funny things if they wanted to.
right.
And, society upon society, we've seen that governments aren't always to be trusted.
I mean, in
You
terms
know?
of farmers in the UK right now, there's a lot of issues going on. I don't want to get too political, but it seems that farms are not nurtured as they should be around the world. I mean, and especially in the UK, and I'd say also in America as well. But you can hear about stories in India and other parts of Africa. It was interesting that you said how, like, some of the farming, the stories in South Africa of the brutality, that was there was a question mark to that, because it, I sort of overthink about that. Like, why would that happen? Why is that a thing? It's almost like scaring people away from being
Yeah,
a farmer, in a way.
exactly. Yeah. Look, yeah, there is, I think, a big sentiment in South Africa in terms of, the white people should go back to where they came from. And for us, it's like, well, I don't really know where that would be, because if you go down my family tree, I'm quite mixed. So I don't even know where I would go. South Africa is my country. Um,
Right.
so there is that sentiment. It's like, if you leave, everything will just go back to how it was, or it will just be better for us, or there will be more for us, kind of thing. Because you must understand the wealth distribution still very much not equal. So there's that sentiment. And I think what Trump's doing is that's, and I'm going to be blunt, it's the standard American thing where America just jumps into a fight, not knowing the subtle nuances, not knowing what's really going on the ground, and actually doing more harm than good. Because that's really what they're doing now.
Very well said. I think you're
Because
right there. Yeah.
the sanctions are going to knock our economy, which is going to make our job a lot harder. Um, the farmers don't want to leave South Africa. They don't want to go to America. They're not interested. They want to stay here. It's their farms. It's their families are here. Their culture is here. They've, you know, bled, and, all the blood, sweat, and tears is in that soil. So they're going to fight for it. So I don't know what he's trying to do. And I don't know what that group of people are trying to do. I think highlighting perhaps the brutality, what's that going to do? What are they going to do? It's
Yeah.
not it's not something we're going to fix from an external source. I don't
Yeah,
think.
I mean, just what you mentioned about bridging the gap. I mean, that is more of a solution than anything that I've heard so far in the news media. And that's not been reported on, So that's what we're here for, discussing and bringing it to the surface. The fact that there are people on the ground that are trying to make things work. For example, like I think it's I forget the name of the chap, but Ubuntu is the term, not
Ubuntu,
Ubuntu.
yes.
Ubuntu, yeah. So
Yeah.
the chap that's involved with that up in northern Natal is very close to Adam's calendar, and he's what's his name again?
Adam, no, not
Sorry,
Adam. Michael Tellinger.
Market Tellinger. Okay, so the little bits of work that you're doing in your parts of the country, and then the work that Michael Tellinger is doing a bit further up in Northern Natal, those are the kind of bright sparks that I love to hear, the stories of working with the communities of the people that are there. And he's got a little town up there where they all have this kind of trade, this industry of trade, where like a painter and a farmer or someone with different trades, they all sort of interact with each other, and that's how the economy of that town works, stepping away from the monetary side of things, the financial hold on things, which I think in a little small community like where he's at, I think you could you could do that. Very hard to do that in say places like London or Johannesburg, but just little moments of trying to do some kind of solution to the community. And I think also bringing some responsibility back to that community to say, let's do something for ourselves. So I really, applaud you on what you're doing at the moment. And I hope to follow you along to see how this develops and how it goes. Maybe some more podcasts in the future, just to update and educate us more on what's going on in South Africa, because it's very hard to find this kind of information,
Yes. Yeah, I think it gets quite murky when you rely on the mainstream media for information. With the whole, there was a bit of a political upheaval in our town, and I got first-hand experience of small town scale, but national news media being manipulated and used. From people in a small little town, nationally, it was eye-opening. In the end, reporters are just humans, right? And you rely on honesty and integrity, and not all of them are going to be that. So not to diss reporters, there were a lot of them that were like really, really integral to getting the truth out there. But it was quite an eye-opener to see the not so nice ones operate.
And in terms of just going back to Michael Tellinger and some of the work that he's actually done, you and I both were fascinated with his work. You've sent me some of his YouTube videos, and I'm, if I was to go back to South Africa, yourself and obviously my family as well, but Michael Tellinger would be someone like I would want to be involved with. Just go and film him, interview him, talk about what he's found, because I think that's probably the most interesting thing about South Africa, is the ancient remnants of what was there before, and that's what I'm doing over in this country. What have you come across anything like that yourself?
So I think I came across Michael Tellinger during my first year of studies. My mind was still in kind of shambles, trying to figure out this whole life thing and what it's all about, and religion and, history and where we're headed. So I found his book called Slave Species of God.
Right.
Fascinating book. Don't agree with everything he says. He's quite far out in terms of some of his takeaways, but
because he talks about the Anunnaki sort of landing in
Anunnaki, and I think he fills a lot of the gaps with his opinion, which can become tricky. But it was nice seeing such a out there perspective that kind of opened my eyes to the possibilities and how little we really know and how little we really understand. And really no one can say for a fact, this is what was, this is what is, and this is what's going to be. And if you do that, in my opinion, you're quite dumb.
Right. Yeah, sure.
Impossible. So that kind of opened the door for me to just, live and see what happens and be open to opinions. And so he's all about the really ancient history of Southern Africa, which isn't written about a lot. There's not a lot of people looking into it. We have the Cradle of Humankind, where they found I forget the skull's name.
They found a lot around Adam's calendar, but also in the ruins in Zimbabwe as well. There's some like ancient ruins that
gold mines.
Yes. They actually, on the GPS, the GPS signals go haywire. So there's something there's something very magnetic about the place as
And
well.
interestingly, there's a documentary on Netflix called Naledi. Have a look at that. So,
Okay.
also close to I think it's close to the cradle of humankind. I mean, it's a cave system, but they went quite far down, and it's a type of um, hominoid that is somewhere in between 300 and 200,000 years ago, I think. But they had a burial ritual, interestingly. And
200, 300 years ago.
so
Wow.
it's kind of rewriting history because the only other humanoid kind of Homo um, erectus kind of arm we have of that was the Neanderthals doing burial rituals, and then us. So this species also did burial rituals, which
Sorry,
is
did you say 200,000 years ago or 200?
200 to 300,000 years ago, I think. I
Wow.
think that's the
Okay. So,
timeline they put on it, yes.
right. Yeah. Because that matches with some of the findings that Michael Tellinger has come about, where it's been suggested that 200,000 years ago, what he says is the Anunnaki, if you want to believe that, came and they were digging for gold there. Now, what I found was very interesting was these pieces of stone that were very, that could be possibly used for tapping to make like sound resonance frequencies. And I just had a theory while watching one of his videos that it was this like a frequency of sound was manipulating the earth to bring the gold to the surface. And that's what all these anomalies were. When I looked
Yes,
at them from above, they looked like as if bubbles had burst or something.
first,
And it
yes.
just,
Yes,
my own
these are
opinion
those
on that.
structures that they said were like cattle kraals, which it
Right,
makes sense because there's no entrances to the things, but
right. But they look like bubbles that have burst and then frozen in a
yes,
state of some kind. Now, obviously, that's just me theorizing and sort of
yeah,
using
your
my
brain goes
imagination
off.
to another level. But when I was watching Michael Tellinger, it just started to make sense. And I think, in terms of the work that I'm doing over here, where I'm exploring the ancient world, because it's very interesting, what's happening in South Africa seems to have also happened in the years in this country as well, with the Romans and even the
Yes.
Saxons and the Vikings. There have been raiders to and colonizers of many lands, and a lot of the ancient people have lost their knowledge, and a lot of the what we use the word aborigines, but really it should be origines, because the ab is the sort of saying the negative of that word. So it's the originals, the origines of the land, the origines of South Africa and South America and Australia. They all had a deep spiritual connection, that was a lot more closer to the nature of the earth. And that is what I'm fascinated with. And I think there's a lot in South Africa that has got this old remnants to it, like the Drakensberg Mountains. There's
Yes,
something
yes,
fascinating about them.
definitely. That's a very spiritual place. There's a lot of places where you can just drive through and you just kind of you feel it's a special place.
Right.
Um, it's amazing. I've felt it on my trip to South Korea as well. Some of the places I visited, I did a bit of a backpacking trip in the summer holiday all along the islands, and I'd camp on beaches, and there was just certain spaces where you have this kind of special feeling. And I
Definitely.
get that a lot in South Africa. I think it's because I grew up here, most likely. But definitely there's a lot of stories that need to be told and need to be still discovered. And I think obviously we know the standard problem with mainstream archaeology is that there's a certain type of tunnel vision um, when
Yeah.
it comes to that. So, and
I
I
mean,
think it's even more so in underdeveloped countries like South Africa. I don't think we're underdeveloped, but I mean, I think these practices don't get a lot of attention and a lot of funding and um, a lot of notoriety, not
right.
as they would anywhere else. So I think there's a lot to be done here. And I think, like for instance, people like Michael Tellinger has his work cut out for him, and then add on his extreme kind of speculations. That makes it even more difficult because people are just going to laugh him off. So it kind of makes it tough to get the story out there.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, and I'm so used to it when I like have a lot of academic friends who require the references, and that's what a lot of the documentaries I'm doing now. Everything's referenced, but at the same time, there's an intrigue to want to go and meet Michael Tellinger and follow his research and look for myself. And I think that's what it is. He's sort of pioneering
Yes,
this idea.
he's very passionate about what he does, and like I said, a lot of the work he does is like very intriguing and very eye-opening. Make no mistake, I'm a big fan. Um,
Yeah,
I just think that if you do want to get this kind of these ideas into the mainstream so that they can be further investigated, you have to tone it down just a tad
yeah.
to kind of
At least
get,
provide the references to the
yes,
specific opinions and sort of theories. Yeah, I agree with
yes.
that, and that's for the academic principles of things, which I agree it's very important. But for me, I don't need that,
Yeah, I know.
like, and you don't
I
need that
also
either.
love it.
Those folk who just we get this idea. Like, I'm working with another chap who is doing some investigation around the country, and he just has a feeling to go there, and suddenly he'll discover there's something ancient about the place and something about the ancient wells or the ancient springs, and but it didn't come from an academic perspective. It just came from this intuitive feeling,
But I mean, we both know that you have the information system, right? And you
Right.
can tap into it. I think we so far gone from being capable to tune into it. I know I'm not very tuned into it. Sometimes yes, sometimes not. Sometimes I get it bang on, sometimes I'm completely off. But you know when you've connected and you're like, "Oh wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That was
No, you're right.
definitely." So yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
nice
I
to be
can
able to
relate
go on
exactly.
adventures like that. Hmm?
Definitely. I can relate, whereas sometimes I'm tuned into it and I'm like, wow, that's interesting. And then other times I missed it. But at the same time, you recognize that there was a kind of guidance of some kind, or a kind of a magnetism pull to want to
Yes.
do something. Like yesterday, I wanted to film something outdoors, and I thought, oh, I don't feel like it. It's too cold. And sure enough, when I got there, it just didn't work out. It
Yes.
wasn't meant to be. But if
Yes.
I'd picked up on that first sense and not done it, I probably would have
Yes.
sat there all day going, well, I don't feel right. I should have gone out to try and film this
Mm.
or do that. So there's always, I think there's that wonderful adventure of just exploring that
Mm.
and recognizing that, and then slowly developing that by tuning
Yes.
in. And I think you're very on cue with that, and that's why we connected. We were talking
Mm.
about this kind of spiritual connection to much more than what we see with our eyes. And maybe
Exactly.
next time when we catch up, because I know you've got a schedule to keep. You've got
Yeah.
to.
We
We're
run a
coming up to
tight
the end
ship
here.
here.
Well, I'm looking at the time, just seeing how much time you've got left. You let me know, and we can call it quits. But I definitely want to come back and maybe go more into that kind of experience of connecting and feeling, especially as a mother, because
Mm.
I always find that those on a kind of spiritual path, it's the feminine that engages with the intuitiveness more than the alpha male, not the alpha, the logistical mind sort of aspect.
Mm.
So,
Yes.
I know that if I'm going to feel in on something, I need to be more sensitive. I need to, be
Mm.
more intuitive. But I find that women have that naturally a lot easier than men.
Yes. And I think, we're facing a lot of the arguments regarding gender roles and, the whole buzz around that now. And I think that's that's where we um, are a bit misguided on male female roles in today's age. We are, females are more intuitive, emotionally in tuned. Um, so that's our role, right? That's our role. We guide everyone. If they have a difficult time, we have a very good way of looking from the outside in and being able to assist and guide and um, explore, really.
I
And I've
agree.
seen that with my husband, I've seen it with my children. Um, he relies a lot on my intuition in terms of these type of things. more kind of soft skills, if I could put it that way. I, on the other hand, fully rely on his protection. I mean, if in my mind's eye, I always see him with this, shield, and me and the kids in the back, and it's just like this onslaught from the outside, and he's just taking all that in. But, he reaches a capacity, and then I'm there to kind of de-escalate whatever's cooking in his soul.
Right.
So I think that's how we were put together.
That's the balance.
That's how we were made.
Yeah. And having 3 children now, how has that been for you? Just like, it must have happened so quickly, just becoming a mother.
The other day I looked at our little baby boy, the youngest, he's 8 months old now. And I looked at him and I'm like, the other day I was just pregnant with the first one, and now we have 3. Like, we have 3 kids. That's insane.
I know, right?
When did this happen?
My
But
God.
it's amazing. It really is. It's been the best adventure ever. Changed my perspective on life completely. And I struggled a lot in my early years with purpose and feeling really lost. And motherhood really gave me that purpose.
Right.
Anything. And it gave me the kind of nudge to find more purposeful things to do in life,
Right.
and focus and really go after it instead of just building the pies in the sky. So yeah, I've fully enjoyed motherhood. It's been interesting parenting, from both parents' perspective, doing it with my husband and dealing with, both of us come from quite traumatizing childhoods, difficult childhoods, and figuring out what we are still carrying with us, what we shouldn't, what we should just shed, because you're not always kind of aware. And so we help each other in that sense a lot. So that's been very interesting. And just
Right.
seeing these little creatures that are just their own. And people say, like, it's always this sense of nature versus nurture. Your genetics versus how you are raised. And that's definitely a thing. I think everyone definitely is born so unique, with this unique consciousness and this unique soul attached to their bodies. And then your experiences kind of develop those aspects. And I can see it in my kids. They're not one of them the same. So very fascinating.
Wow. That is fascinating. And like, as a mother, you'd see that a lot more, maybe, like, than, obviously I've not got kids, but I admire the woman who can see this, in their children, in other people as well, and it's like, going back to what you said, I have always been someone that asks the female for advice, just, or at least I give a scenario to the female and see what they give back to me, because they're always going to give that. It feels like a more of a whole perspective, of that very intuitive wholeness.
I think the big thing that motherhood taught me is like a deep selflessness, like a really deep selflessness. Yeah. Make no mistake, I do get selfish at times, because you do get exhausted, and it is quite exhausting. We've gone through a little bit of a thing. Our eldest now, they level up as they grow. The understanding levels up, and so it becomes a bit more complicated. The conversations become more complicated, the emotions become more complicated, and there's no book on this. Yeah. So it's, if you don't know, you don't know, and then you're in the moment and you kind of have to figure it out, and it's like the blind leading the blind. And I just realized with this last little level up, if you would, that I have to increase my patience. Right. I have to increase my patience now. I have to level up my capacity for being patient, because she talks quite a bit, and like, she likes to color in the picture, so right. And you know how the sentence is going to end, but you have to give it the space to express herself fully. And then you realize, okay, but I might have thought I knew what she was going to say, but I didn't really, because there were some things that came with that I wouldn't have picked up on. So very interesting.
Brilliant. Really good. And just one last thing about, you showed me some pictures of the dog that you have that's very protective when it comes to snakes,
Oh,
right?
yes. What a
He's
chap,
killed a
eh?
lot. He's killed a few snakes, eh?
Yeah, he's such an old soul. He's, you know, I haven't ever experienced any other creature like him.
But he
I haven't have ever had that. He's so intuitive and so mature and so calm and just balanced. Like he brings balance to our house. If he walks in,
really,
everyone just calms the fuck down because he, if there's a commotion outside, he'd walk really chill, just let's go check it out. If need be, then he'll jump in. Um,
wow.
and
And when you say
yeah,
jump in, you mean like this is with other wild
with
animals or
other dogs,
other
animals,
dogs?
um, very, very intuitive. So I'll give you an example. We were living out on the farm for a while. I told you about that for about, I think, a half a year, 6 months or so. And we had a baby cat, and we were sitting outside on the veranda. It was a very hot night, and he was laying down on the veranda. Keeping in mind, he's like a 50 kg dog, and old, has hip dysplasia. And the cat was outside, and an owl just came down trying to catch this little kitten, and he was on this owl like you wouldn't believe. And he was about five
Wow,
meters away. And he saved the cat. So he's, I
wow,
don't know how he knew because it was as if he already went for it before the owl even appeared. It was very
right.
strange. And then with the
Like he
kids,
sensed it. Yeah,
yeah, with the kids, he would be with them when they play outside all the time, but not like on top of them, just there in the periphery. And every time he killed a snake, it was close to my children.
wow.
Yeah,
And he actually would take a bite off the snake and then
yeah.
would take a rest and work through the poison and then you'd be okay.
Yeah. Well, no. So the two puff adders, he got bitten by puff adders twice. He killed two, got bitten every time. The first time was quite bad. It was inside his lip and his face just blew up. And the hospital story, my husband was then, our driver, Augustine, was fetching him from hospital in Mossel Bay. And so they were on the road, and I was on the farm alone. My daughter came running in saying, Noah's got a snake. I ran out, saw the snake was dead, so that was good. I anyway took a shovel and kind of just decapitated it. But
Right,
then I had to get this big log into the car. I mean, he's 50 kgs. The car's quite
right,
high. And then so drove through to the vet, got him his anti-venom, and he was fine. He was a bit grumpy for a couple of days, and his face was really swollen. The second time was on his leg, and then the third time was a Cape Cobra, which luckily didn't get to him, because if he
right,
did, they die. There's no
right,
the chances of him dying is like 90%. So
right.
luckily he didn't get bitten there, and that was the last one, and I'm hoping it was the last one because three
Still,
times lucky, and then
yeah, right. I know, but like it's such an amazing story, and I'll if it's okay to share those pictures that you shared, because one of the some of the
yeah,
snakes is as long as the rake that you put down, you know?
yeah. So they were quite big, and the scary part is the Cape Cobra. He got by the kind of washing line, and me and my little daughter were there the morning, and then we were out just outside the little quad the afternoon, and that's where not very like an hour later, and that's where he killed it. So it must have been really nearby at that
Wow.
time. So very scary.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep that from my mom. If she hears about it, she'll be the first one to run on water, you know.
Yeah, no. Look, I'm not a big fan. I don't mind snakes, but the venomous ones, we are actually in a bit of an anti-venom shortage in the country at the moment. So I'm quite nervous about it. So
Right.
don't want to get
So so
anyone.
you so you kind of be very concerned about where you walk. You make a lot of noise where you walk and stuff like
Yeah.
that. I mean, I did that in Thailand.
Yeah,
That's
the
where
thing is, yeah, puffies are very lazy, so they'll wait for you to step on them and they'll just kill you. So they'll just bite you.
I.
They're not
Yeah.
gonna move away.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of things about South Africa. Just the idea of camping out
Yeah.
is a no-no for me right now. You know, I don't mind camping in the UK or South Korea, but I just no, I'd be up in the tree If
So
that, and with lots of guns.
interestingly, this will be my last story, and then I'll have to go. But
Yeah.
interestingly, we this weekend that passed, my husband and I went to the West Coast. Friends of ours, um, a doctor. Him and his wife are honorary members of the Sand Parks. So Sand Parks is about, I think there's 11 parks in the country, national parks, and they're honorary members, which means that you do your hours and then you get a little uniform, and then every year you have to do 50 hours of volunteer work in the parks to keep your honorary membership. And so we're going to be part of that. There is a national park right close to us on the Breda River. And so my husband and I are going to do our tests now and our hours, and then we can go all over the country where help is needed and log our hours, which is excellent. And for instance, in the Northern Cape, they have a junior group. So you have all the kids of the people that are part of the honorary club that can take
Right.
their kids. So very excited about that. So when you come to visit, hopefully we've got some projects in parks so
Brilliant.
we can drag you in
Yeah.
there.
Excellent. I mean, that's the plan, just to do some kind of adventure there. But at the same time, it's the YouTube channel that's got to fund me to get there. So I've got to get my
Yes.
subscribers. That's the main thing. So yeah, no, as soon as that happens, I think South Africa is one of the first places I want to visit, and just get a sense of what it's like from when I was there such a long time ago, and I've just heard only the stories from yourself and other South Africans I've met in South Korea. Actually, more South Africans in South Korea than most friends I had in the world, to be honest. So it was a great way of reconnecting with my past, and I always wanted to go back there just to get the feel of how things are moving forward, because that's what it's all about. It's
Well,
how
I'd
does it
love
look
for you
like.
to come visit. There's a lot to show you.
Right.
Make sure you come for a good stint.
Yeah. It couldn't just be 2 weeks, traveling that far. It'd have to be
No,
a
you'll
couple of
have to
months.
do it. Yeah, you'll have to do a couple of months because you've got some people to visit, and
Yeah.
I mean, just the amount of stuff I have to show you is insane. So
Right. Right. I'll bring all my cameras and hopefully get a motorbike over there if I can, because
yeah,
that's
definitely.
the other thing. Wonderful,
Okay,
Luli.
Liam.
Thank you so much for this. It's been very educational on so many levels, and we'll get it out as soon as I've got it sorted. Wonderful stuff.
Yeah.
We'll do
Thanks
this
for
again.
inviting me. Yes, please.
Definitely.
It was nice seeing your face.
Indeed, you too, and just such an adventure that you're on as well. With the kids
Yeah.
and marriage and the hospital and everything you're doing. Fingers crossed it all works out well, and I look forward to just getting an update on how things are. And just getting it out there, because it's very rare that we get to hear the news of South Africa properly from boots on the ground, so to speak.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's very important, and I think getting the different perspectives, because I kind of feel like you have to speak to more people. So maybe in the next one, I can invite Donovan Julies or someone from the community to kind of
Brilliant.
give some more insight. I think that would
Wow,
be
that would be fascinating. I've got so
yes.
many questions for something like that. Yeah.
Good.
Brilliant.
All
I'll
right.
say
Thanks,
goodbye
Liam.
from
Cheers.
Adventures in Gonzo Vision. Thanks for being here, and good luck in your day.